The cool autumn morning of 2014 began with a quiet disturbance on Oakridge Drive, a street where little out of the ordinary ever happened in Bountiful, Utah. 4 unmarked police cars silently pulled up in front of a modest single-story home, engines turned off, with no one stepping out right away. Neighbors peeked through their curtains as officers in tactical gear fanned out, slowly surrounding the area as if they had practiced this hundreds of times. Inside the garage, Nathan Hale, 43 years old, was brewing his morning coffee, a habit he had kept since Emily Whitford disappeared in 2001, before preparing to drive his Suburban to work. A loud, insistent knock came at 6:12 a.m. "Nathan Hale, Davis County Sheriff's Office, we have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the disappearance of Emily Whitford." Officers later reported that Nathan's hand trembled slightly as he set the coffee cup down, but his face remained unnaturally calm, as if he had known this day would eventually come after 13 years of silence. Before we dive deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. In the summer of 2001, the Farmington-Bountiful area of Davis County, Utah, still maintained the peaceful rhythm of a small suburb, where rows of wooden homes lined wide streets with light traffic, and nearly everyone knew each other. Against this backdrop, Emily Whitford, 29 years old, was living with her 2 young children in Farmington after separating from her ex-husband, Nathan Hale, who remained in their former home in Bountiful. The separation had dragged on for months, and legal proceedings required them to continue exchanging documents related to insurance and child support. On the afternoon of July 17, Emily drove her silver sedan to Nathan's house with the 2 children to pick up the insurance paperwork she needed to submit that week. They left Farmington in the early afternoon, traveling along US 89 under the harsh sun, following Emily's carefully timed routine to avoid traffic in downtown Bountiful. Around 12:37 p.m., a neighbor living next to Nathan's house saw the familiar sedan pull into the driveway and watched Emily step into the north garage of the house, where the garage door was open. The 2 children were left in the car for a few minutes before Nathan brought them inside. From that moment on, no one in the neighborhood saw Emily come back out or leave the property. By late afternoon, when Emily failed to return as promised to her mother to help prepare dinner, her family began to worry. Her phone was unreachable. Repeated calls went straight to voicemail after ringing. Emily's parents drove to several places she often visited: her best friend's house, the local grocery store, the nearby park, but no one had seen her all day. When they called Nathan to ask, the family was told only that Emily had left after picking up the paperwork, maybe to go shopping, but he provided no specific time or location. This information heightened their unease because Emily hadn't brought her second purse, which she always took when shopping, and she had no plans that day suggesting she would do so. By evening, after exhaustive searches throughout Farmington and Bountiful yielded no trace, the family had to acknowledge that Emily's disappearance was no longer within the realm of an ordinary delay. At 8:54 p.m., they decided to call the Davis County Sheriff's Office to report an unusual missing person situation. At the Davis County Sheriff's Office, the call was transferred to dispatch shortly before 9 p.m., during a quieter phase of the shift, but with full staffing still available to handle emergency reports. The dispatcher quickly took down the details, recording basic information: the victim's full name, age, physical description, vehicle, last known sighting time, and places she was expected to visit that day. After determining this was not a voluntary departure or a simple family dispute, the case was elevated to Missing Person Level 2 per Utah guidelines, a priority level for adults missing under suspicious or unusual circumstances, especially when the last known actions provided no reasonable explanation for their movements. The on-duty officer immediately contacted Nathan Hale to verify the last sighting of Emily. He stated she left his house in the early afternoon but could not provide an exact time and suggested she might have gone shopping. When asked to recount the circumstances and the duration of Emily's presence at the house, Nathan gave vague answers and offered no clear details about her leaving the garage or which direction she went. Meanwhile, another officer visited the family at their home in Farmington to gather preliminary information: the clothing Emily was wearing that day, items she had with her, her usual travel habits, vehicle condition, and any personal relationships that might be relevant to her disappearance. Useful information from neighbors was also documented, including confirmation of the time Emily left home in the afternoon, the number of unsuccessful attempts to contact her, and the fact that no one saw her return during the afternoon or evening. After compiling the data, police established a timeline framework: the time Emily left Farmington with the children, the time she was seen entering Nathan's north garage, the time the family began searching, and the timely contacted police. The final marker authorities noted was the last known position at the north garage of the house in Bountiful. From this LKP, police compiled a list of areas to check within the first 24 hours, including the main route between Farmington and Bountiful, residential areas near Nathan's home, places Emily frequently visited, and locations where she might appear if she had left voluntarily. On-duty officers reviewed the entire report to identify points needing clarification the following morning. At this initial stage, although there were no direct signs of criminal activity, the case was still deemed unusual due to Emily's complete loss of contact over an extended period and the absence of any activity matching her normal daily routine. Once preliminary information gathering was complete, the case file was entered into the system for transfer to field investigation and reconstruction of Emily's final movements, the starting point in the process of investigating an adult missing person case in Davis County. The next morning, upon receiving instructions from the investigations unit, the Davis County Search and Rescue Team was activated and deployed to search within a 3-mile radius of Emily's last known location, the garage at Nathan's home in Bountiful. This area featured complex terrain, including winding residential side streets, small trails hidden beneath dense clusters of trees, and drainage systems running along the secondary streets on the northern edge of the Salt Lake Valley. To ensure full and systematic coverage, the SAR commander divided the force into smaller teams, each assigned a specific sector, conducting line sweeps, documenting evidence, and cross-referencing data with updated topographic maps. Foot patrol teams began at the streets adjacent to Nathan's house, checking every yard, fence line, backyard area, and intersection where traffic cameras or private home cameras, if present, might have captured unusual activity. Although civilian camera systems were not widespread in 2001, officers still noted the locations of any potential devices for later review. In the nearest trail areas, the search team expanded on foot using a grid search pattern, dividing the land into small sections and systematically checking each one for fresh footprints, dropped items, or signs of adult movement. As the sun rose higher, a specialized vegetation team entered a sparse wooded area less than a mile from Nathan's house, where thick underbrush and soft soil often preserve footprints or drag marks. They inspected the ground section by section, noting unusual depressions, broken branches, or disturbed soil patches, but found no evidence connected to Emily. In parallel with the foot teams, a K9 tracking unit was deployed directly at Nathan's driveway. The handler used scent articles from a jacket and personal items of Emily provided by the family. The dog began working as directed, sniffing around the garage area, then along the driveway and around the side of the house. However, after following the trail to the edge of the road, it lost the scent and could not determine a continuation. This led police to note that if Emily had left the area, her direction of travel either left no strong scent trail or had been disrupted by nighttime traffic and wind. The K9 team conducted 2 additional runs to rule out error, but each produced similar results. The scent stopped near the driveway, with no confirmation that Emily left the area on foot. Additionally, crews opened and inspected every manhole and drainage inlet within the 3-mile radius for unusual items or signs of objects being dragged through. Roadside ditches were also scanned with high-powered lights. No evidence, unusual stains, or physical signs indicated anyone had been moved through these areas. The urban environment team continued sweeping unfinished construction sites, vacant homes, temporary storage yards, and hidden spots around the neighborhood. Every location where a victim might have stayed, been held, or been concealed was checked according to standard protocol. The sweep was repeated in a second pass to ensure no details were missed, particularly at intersections between main and side roads where initial orientation errors commonly occur. Near midday, a SAR team checked bus stops, temporary parking areas, and pickup points along US 89 to determine whether Emily might have left the area by public transportation. However, no witnesses there reported seeing a woman matching her description during the relevant time frame. The preliminary summary after 5 hours of continuous searching showed no clear direction of travel, no physical evidence, no additional items, and no indication that Emily had left the area voluntarily. The on-scene data, once entered into the file, indicated that despite thorough coverage, the search yielded no valuable leads, reinforcing the initial assessment that this disappearance did not fit the characteristics of someone who left their last known location on their own. The full morning's results were documented in a report prepared for submission to the investigations unit to evaluate the next steps in determining the cause of Emily Whitford's disappearance. On the second day of searching, the search and rescue commander decided to expand the operational area from the Bountiful residential neighborhood outward to broader zones, including the eastern corridor adjacent to Farmington Bay and the roads leading toward Antelope Island, where the terrain stretches across marshes, waterfront grasslands, and soft, muddy areas that readily preserve tracks if a person or vehicle passes through. The SAR mapping team remarked all key areas, established arc-shaped travel lines, and assigned teams using an expanding square search tactic to ensure systematic coverage with each outroute expansion. Initial teams moved along trails toward the Bay Area, where tall reeds, soft soil, and marshy patches typically retain footprints and dropped items more clearly than dry residential zones. After nearly an hour of searching there, a SAR team member spotted a small white object lying amid wind-flattened grass. Upon closer inspection, they identified it as a folded piece of paper, slightly smudged from overnight dew but still intact. Inside was a handwritten shopping list, matching handwriting samples the family confirmed as Emily's. The item was flagged, photographed, GPS tagged, and temporarily sealed for transfer to the investigations team. This discovery immediately prompted the command team to redirect additional resources to the surrounding area to determine whether it was a random drop or related to an unusual movement by the victim. However, according to Nathan's initial statement, Emily was said to have left his house heading south to go shopping. In contrast, the paper was found in the northwest part of Bountiful, near the edge of the Farmington Bay marsh, completely off any logical route to shopping areas in the region. This became the first major inconsistency between physical evidence and Nathan's account, prompting the investigations team to temporarily designate the area as a zone of interest. As the SAR team continued moving against the wind direction, another item was discovered, a clear plastic water bottle of the type Emily typically carried in her car, found about 300 meters west of the paper's location. The bottle showed no signs of prolonged exposure, suggesting it had not been there for more than a few days. Based on the positions of the two items, teams established a new triangular search zone, sweeping along the marsh edge, transitional banks, and low brush areas. During the sweep, they paid special attention to sections of ground with slight cracking where a heavy object might have been placed, but nothing new indicated Emily's presence. When the mapping team entered the evidence coordinates into the internal GIS system, they compared the locations to typical resident travel patterns in the area and quickly determined that the discovery site was entirely inconsistent with any route a driver or pedestrian would take, from Nathan's house to any shopping or appointment location in the region. The analysis team concluded this was not a place Emily would have gone voluntarily. This assessment was immediately forwarded to the SAR supervisor and the investigative team working directly with the victim's family. Following standard protocol, the SAR team classified the items. Belongings of the victim found off a reasonable path were prioritized as evidence, to be transferred to investigations for determination of relevance to the disappearance. The shopping list and water bottle were sealed, tagged with evidence labels, photographed, documented, and placed in a mobile evidence container. Discovery coordinates were noted on the master map, and dispatch immediately adjusted that day's search boundaries, reinforcing teams toward the land-marsh interface. Another team was sent to the Antelope Island access point to assess potential vehicle movement, but no tire tracks or items matching Emily's vehicle or the case were found. After completing the expanded search for the day, the SAR commander summarized 2 personal items directly linked to the victim appeared in locations inconsistent with Nathan's statement. No evidence showed Emily went to this area voluntarily. The surrounding terrain provided no natural clues, such as drag marks, footprints, or logical travel paths. The report was sent to the investigations unit with a recommendation to elevate the disappearance assessment to possible foul play. Due to the anomalous appearance of evidence and inconsistencies in the primary witness's account, all data was updated in the case file in preparation for the next steps in determining the cause of Emily Whitford's disappearance. After Emily's belongings were found in an area inconsistent with the route Nathan described, the investigations unit proceeded to the next step, constructing an official timeline to determine the critical time window between when Emily left Farmington and when her family reported her missing to police. Investigators collected statements in chronological order from 3 main sources: Nathan, Daniel, and neighbors living around Nathan's house. From the family's statements, police established the first marker. Emily left her home in Farmington around 12:05 p.m. to head to Bountiful. A neighbor next to Nathan's house provided the second marker. Around 12:37 p.m., they saw Emily step into the north garage, while the 2 children were brought inside by Nathan a few minutes later. This was the last confirmed sighting by a witness. When working with Nathan, police asked him to recount the entire time frame of the day, particularly the period from 12:30 p.m. to 20:40 p.m. to 20:40 p.m. Nathan stated that Emily was in the garage for just a few minutes, that they exchanged paperwork, and then she left to go shopping around 1007 p.m. However, when pressed for more details about the direction she went, Nathan could not specify whether she exited through the garage or the front door, nor could he clearly describe the condition of her sedan when it left. This statement began to raise doubts when investigators cross-checked with information from another neighbor living across the street. That person reported that from 12:40 p.m. to 1010 p.m., they did not see the sedan leave the driveway, nor did they observe any vehicle matching the description leaving the neighborhood in either direction toward the main road. When Daniel's statement was added to the file, the inconsistencies became even clearer. Daniel, who was present in the area that afternoon but not directly involved in the meeting, stated that he went down to the garage around 1010 p.m. to look for Nathan and found the garage door open but no one inside, adding that he thought Emily had already left. However, the 1:10 p.m. time Daniel provided did not align with Nathan's claim that Emily had left around a 1:00 p.m. and that the garage door had been closed. Investigators asked both to clarify the timing of the garage door opening and closing, but their accounts differed. Nathan said he closed it after Emily left, while Daniel claimed it was still open when he checked. This discrepancy became the first point of comparison showing that their statements did not align regarding the sequence of actions. The investigating agency continued building a timeline table from 1200.4, noting every witness-confirmed marker, every statement-based marker, and the periods lacking clear data. The timeline revealed a notable gap of nearly an hour and a half, from around 12:40 p.m., when Emily was last seen entering the garage, to after 20 p.m., when Nathan claimed he began preparing for the afternoon and had no further interaction with Emily. No witness saw Emily leave the garage. No reports indicated a vehicle leaving the driveway during the time Nathan said she departed, and no visual evidence supported her direction of travel. This forced investigators to designate the 12:40 to 2 p.m. period as an inconsistency zone, the time window containing the greatest number of contradictions in the statements and requiring priority analysis. After completing the timeline, investigators directly compared the statements of Nathan and Daniel. Nathan provided a brief, low-detail sequence, while Daniel described several points that did not match, particularly regarding the garage door status and his own arrival time nearby. These inconsistencies were not sufficient to draw a conclusion, but they were enough to flag both statements as unstable and in need of cross-verification with other data. The compiled timeline was forwarded to the Evidence Evaluation Unit to determine what events might have occurred during the blank period and whether the absence of any observed activity held significance for Emily not reappearing that day. In the end-of-day internal report, investigators concluded that the current timeline could not yet establish the victim's direction of travel, but the lack of consistency among key witnesses' statements and the existence of an unexplained time gap were critical factors requiring the case file to be expanded for deeper foul play evaluation. Based on the constructed timeline and the inconsistencies in Nathan's and Daniel's statements, the investigative team decided to visit Nathan's house to conduct an initial non-intrusive scene survey, meaning no deep search warrant was required, and the scope was limited to visual observation of the exterior and open areas. Upon arrival, officers noted that the house was completely quiet, the garage door was partially open, and the driveway showed no recent activity except for Nathan's dark green Suburban parked slightly to the right. They began examining the garage area from outside, shining flashlights into corners and observing the concrete floor. Within minutes, one officer noted that the floor surface had an unusual sheen, as though it had recently been wiped or scrubbed vigorously. This was documented in the report, along with a description of faint streaky marks extending from near the garage door inward. Although there were no colored stains or liquid residues, these streaks differed from the rest of the floor, indicating recent intervention. Moving closer to the left wall, they discovered a series of fresh scratches on the concrete. The parallel scratches ranged from 20 to 40 centimeters in length and showed signs of being caused by a heavy object being dragged or scraped across the floor. The area was completely empty, with no tools or objects present that could account for the scratches, prompting officers to note that this was a sign to be cross-referenced with items in the house if a future warrant was obtained. In addition to the four surface signs, the survey team also detected a faint chemical cleaning odor in the air, distinct from motor oil or the usual smell of a frequently used garage. The odor lightly extended into the driveway, suggesting cleaning may have occurred shortly before police arrived. When asked about the purpose of cleaning the garage, Nathan replied that he had cleaned because he spilled some oil from the vehicle the previous day. But the floor area showed no oil stains or repair tools nearby to support this explanation. The investigative team noted that Nathan's answer lacked consistency with on-scene observations. Shifting to the driveway, officers examined the concrete surface from the garage door out to the street. There were no unusual tire marks, no wheel skids, or signs of anything being dragged. However, two small areas near the left edge of the driveway showed a light erasure of dust, forming irregular shapes as though something had been temporarily placed there and then moved. Although it was difficult to determine whether this related to the disappearance, officers photographed it and included it in the report. Around the perimeter of the house, they checked along the wooden fence, shrubbery, and the area connecting the front yard to the side yard. No prominent drag marks or footprints were found, nor were any dropped items discovered. One officer used a flashlight to inspect the soil edges along the garage wall for signs of disturbed vegetation, but the results were entirely negative. Continuing to observe easily overlooked spots such as steps, moss, or stains on the ground, the team found nothing beyond the normal level of activity for a residence. When returning to the garage for final notes, they checked door handles, hanging shelves, and tool baskets. But per non-intrusive guidelines, they were not permitted to open containers or move items. One officer noted that the floor section against the rear garage wall had a different sheen, but it was not prominent enough to conclude concealment activity. Before leaving, the survey team conducted a perimeter sweep, checking the ground near the back door, looking around the trash area, and inspecting drainage paths. None showed clear criminal indicators. Because there was no direct physical evidence or signs of violence, officers concluded that the exterior scene and garage did not provide sufficient legal basis to request a deeper search warrant. Their report was forwarded to the investigations commander, emphasizing that although there were anomalous signs including recently cleaned garage floor, chemical odor, and mechanical scratches, these factors did not meet Utah's probable cause standard. Thus, at this stage, the survey concluded at the level of observation and documentation and could not be expanded into a warranted search. After the survey of Nathan's house failed to provide sufficient legal grounds for a deep search warrant, the investigative team shifted focus to analyzing pre-disappearance behavior to determine whether there were any signs of preparation or unusual conduct on the part of Nathan and Daniel. Initially, investigators requested purchase history records for the 2 weeks prior to the disappearance through local stores and debit card logs. Results showed that 3 days before Emily arrived at Nathan's house, he had purchased a 50-foot roll of synthetic rope, a roll of wide duct tape, and disposable latex gloves at a hardware store near Centerville. Although these items were not illegal, their timing so close to the disappearance caused them to be flagged as items of interest. When asked about the purpose of these purchases, Nathan gave only a vague answer, that they were for repairing a wall-mounted shelf and securing items in the vehicle. But investigators noted no evidence in the garage or house indicating any ongoing repair project. In parallel with purchase history analysis, investigators reviewed Nathan's phone logs for the 48 hours before and after Emily's disappearance. The logs showed an unusual drop in Nathan's call frequency on the day of the incident, with a gap of over an hour in the afternoon matching the blank period in the timeline previously identified by the team. After 2 p.m., the logs showed several outgoing calls, but none to Emily's family or any contact inquiring about her status, which investigators deemed inconsistent with the expected response of someone who had recently separated but still shared responsibility for 2 children. For Daniel, phone logs indicated he was in the Bountiful area that afternoon and made no calls between 12:30 and 1:15 p.m. This communication gap, combined with his previously inconsistent statement about the garage door status, caused police to re-flag Daniel as a person of interest requiring continued monitoring. Meanwhile, Emily's financial data was retrieved to rule out the possibility that she had left voluntarily for personal reasons. Debit and credit card reports for the 72 hours before her disappearance showed no cash withdrawals, no purchases of new personal items, no hotel bookings, and no transactions suggesting intent to leave Farmington or travel far. Her bill payment records and work schedule also gave no indication of plans to depart. This reinforced the hypothesis that her disappearance was not voluntary. After reviewing transaction data, investigators continued analyzing Nathan's behavior in the 48 hours leading up to the disappearance. They noted several anomalies. Nathan took half the afternoon off work the day before Emily arrived. He visited 2 different hardware stores instead of buying everything at one location as was his usual pattern. and he spent nearly the entire morning of the incident day at home with no verifiable reason for doing so. One neighbor reported that Nathan was rarely home at midday on weekdays, yet that day his vehicle was parked in the driveway early, which police documented as a detail warranting further review. Additionally, investigators analyzed Nathan's daily activities using bank data, fuel receipts, and the limited traffic camera footage available. These did not fully align with his stated schedule for that afternoon, increasing suspicion that Nathan may have deliberately adjusted information to avoid questions related to Emily's disappearance. At the conclusion of the analysis, the investigative team determined that no evidence from Emily's activities suggested she planned to leave her current life, while Nathan's transactions and behavior in the lead-up to the disappearance contained multiple points of concern requiring further scrutiny. This provided grounds to broaden the assessment of possible foul play, although it was still insufficient to reach a conclusion or obtain a deeper search warrant at that point. When behavioral and transactional data revealed numerous anomalies in Nathan's activities leading up to the disappearance, the investigative team shifted to evaluating the involved vehicles, starting with Emily's sedan, which had remained parked in front of Nathan's house since the day she vanished. An exterior inspection of the car showed no signs of collision or force impact, but upon opening the doors to check the interior, investigators quickly noted several details inconsistent with the family's description. The driver's seat was adjusted much farther back than Emily's usual position, based on statements that she was petite and always kept the seat pulled forward. The slide marks on the seat rails were fresh, indicating the seat had been adjusted close to the time the car was abandoned. Road dust on the driver's side floor mat was thicker than in other areas, and the dust layer did not match the typical light-colored soil of Bountiful and Farmington, but had a faint reddish tint, suggesting origin from an area with different soil composition. On the interior door handle, investigators applied fingerprint powder but recovered no clear prints, possibly because the car had been wiped down before being left, or the person who touched it wore gloves. The passenger side storage pocket was undisturbed but had a single dry blade of grass, stuck to the edge grass not common in residential areas, and typically found in foothill or eastern Utah Valley regions. These details caused the investigative team to designate Emily's vehicle as a vehicle of interest and move on to inspecting Nathan's Suburban, the vehicle he used daily. The inspection was limited to surface and undercarriage observation to avoid exceeding legal boundaries. At the front of the Suburban, investigators noticed thicker than usual road dust on the mud flaps, dark red in color with high adhesion not matching the gray dust commonly seen on city streets. Along the undercarriage, particularly near the rear axle, patches of soil had caked on in layers, indicating the vehicle had traveled over a moist dirt road that later dried. Investigators scraped a soil sample for comparison. When compared to Utah's geological database, the analyzing specialist determined that the red soil adhering to the Suburban matched characteristics of eastern and southeastern regions of the state, such as areas around Ogden Canyon, Price Valley, or iron-rich sandstone formations. This was not the type of soil found in Bountiful or Farmington, which have carbonate-rich lighter-colored soil. The soil particle characteristics, larger size, less rounded edges, darker color, and iron oxide content were clear indicators that the Suburban had entered valley or canyon terrain, where surface soil readily adheres to the undercarriage during travel. This contradicted Nathan's statement that he remained at home all afternoon and never left the area. For further verification, investigators checked records from local car washes, but found no transactions indicating Nathan had washed the vehicle that day or shortly before. This supported the possibility that the adhering soil remained from the most recent movement and had not been affected by washing or other environmental factors. Additionally, when comparing the dust inside Emily's car with the soil sample from under the Suburban, experts noted that both had high iron oxide content, suggesting both vehicles may have contacted the same geographic area outside the Bountiful Farmington region. Although the sample from Emily's car was smaller and more mixed with ordinary dust, the presence of the same red soil remained a significant match. These findings led the investigative team to a preliminary conclusion that Nathan's Suburban had left the residential area during an undetermined time period and likely traveled to hilly or rocky valley terrain, inconsistent with Nathan's claim of staying home all afternoon. At the same time, the interior of Emily's car showed no signs that she had left Nathan's house in her own vehicle. There were no signs of struggle, no disturbed belongings, but the seat adjustment and mismatched soil evidence suggested the car may have been moved or handled by someone else. In summary, The observations and soil samples collected from both vehicles were entered into the case file as key leads indicating that the involved vehicles may have traveled to locations outside the Stare, Bountiful Farmington area during the time of Emily's disappearance, opening a new avenue of analysis in evaluating the movements of the relevant parties on the day of the incident. After analysis of the two vehicles' condition failed to provide sufficient legal grounds for compulsory expanded investigation, the case file team conducted a large-scale witness re-review to either support or refute the hypothesis that Emily left the garage via any observable route. Over 3 weeks, police interviewed more than 40 residents living around Nathan's neighborhood, including those directly across the street, those with line of sight to the driveway, households frequently active at midday, and pedestrians passing through the area between 12:30 and 12:30 and 12 p.m. The results showed that no one saw Emily leave the garage or depart the area in her vehicle. Several neighbors immediately adjacent to Nathan's house confirmed that from the time they saw the sedan arrive early in the afternoon, they observed no activity related to the vehicle leaving, even though they were home or in their yards for much of the time. One witness who regularly walked for exercise along the street around 1500 p.m. stated she did not see any silver vehicle pass during that period. Another witness working from home near the end of the block confirmed that Nathan's driveway showed no vehicle departures or arrivals until mid-afternoon. In parallel with interviews, police also sought private camera footage, but in 2001, residential security cameras were not widespread in the area, and most households did not use recording devices. A few homes had motion sensor cameras that only triggered alerts without recording images. Investigators checked nearby businesses, but because the house was located deep within the residential area, no commercial establishments had cameras facing that street. Efforts to retrieve traffic camera data also yielded no results. Cameras on main roads at the time were primarily for monitoring traffic flow and volume, had low resolution, and did not retain long-term storage. No recordings within the relevant time frame could confirm that Emily or her vehicle had left the Bountiful area in any direction. With no visual evidence or direct eyewitness accounts obtained, investigators returned to evaluating the possibility that Emily left the area by other means, such as walking or being picked up. However, all witnesses affirmed they saw no woman matching her description walking in the area throughout the afternoon, and no unfamiliar vehicles stopped near Nathan's house during the critical time frame. The complete absence of any movement indicators made the hypothesis that Emily left voluntarily highly implausible. Nevertheless, although indirect clues and Nathan's behavioral anomalies all pointed toward possible foul play, the investigating agency still lacked physical evidence to confirm that a crime had occurred. There was no blood, no scene of violence, no witnesses reporting unusual sounds beyond ordinary door opening and closing, no camera data proving Emily was taken or intercepted, and neither her vehicle nor Nathan's contained evidence conclusively establishing criminal activity, despite numerous suspicious points. Soil analysis on the Suburban indicated the vehicle had left the area, but the timing, purpose, or connection to Emily could not be determined. Phone data also failed to provide any specific link proving Nathan or Daniel moved at the same time as suspicious activity. The legal requirements for establishing probable cause to conduct deeper searches or pursue charges were not met, and no evidence was identified strong enough to directly tie to Emily's disappearance. In the internal reports at the end of 2001, investigators clearly stated that all gathered information only demonstrated anomalies and contradictions in statements, but contained no forensic or direct witness evidence capable of advancing a criminal investigation. The early 2002 case review meeting concluded that although Emily's disappearance involved many unusual factors, there was no legal basis or physical evidence to proceed to prosecution or arrest. Per Davis County policy, the file did not qualify to remain an active investigation. Therefore, the case was officially transferred to the cold case category, meaning no further investigative action would be taken unless new evidence emerged. The file was sealed according to procedure and archived under Cold Case Code 02147, marking the temporary closure of one of the most difficult-to-explain disappearances in the Bountiful Farmington area at that time. In 2014, more than a decade after the file on Emily Whitford's disappearance was placed in the Cold Case 02147 category, the Davis County District Attorney's Office, under the leadership of DA Samuel Cartwright, began implementing a new project to digitize all old data related to unsolved cases from the late 1990s and early 2000s. The goal of the project was to convert documents, crime scene photos, investigative reports, and especially old VHS video segments into digital format to enable analysis with modern technology. While reviewing cold case files in order, the technical team noticed that the Emily Whitford file contained a VHS tape recorded from a camera mounted on a neighbor's vehicle who lived on the same street as Nathan. Previously, the tape had not been considered useful due to its blurry quality, low resolution, and heavy noise, leading the police in 2001 to note only that it did not provide usable information. However, with the project's new digital image restoration system, the imaging specialist decided to submit the tape to an experimental processing workflow. After noise removal, contrast enhancement, and frame stabilization, the analysis team began to observe clearer outlines and motion in the area at the head of Nathan's driveway. A distinctive view of the street, previously buried in noise, now emerged at a level sufficient to identify the location and vehicles. In particular, around 12:37 p.m., synchronized based on the original log and adjustments, the camera captured Emily's silver sedan pulling up in front of the side garage at Nathan's house. The next frame showed Emily stepping out of the vehicle and walking toward the open garage door. The image quality was not sufficient to clearly see her face, but her build, hair, and clothing style matched the descriptions provided by family and witnesses. More importantly, throughout the subsequent sequence of frames, which lasted nearly an hour, the camera recorded no images showing Emily returning or the sedan leaving the driveway. The camera did not record continuously, but operated on a motion-activated mechanism, recording only when an object moving in front of the lens triggered it. During the entire recover time frame, the camera was activated only twice, first when Emily entered the garage, and second when Nathan appeared a few minutes later to bring the two children inside. No further signals indicated similar activity related to Emily or her vehicle afterward. Once the analysis team confirmed the image sequence had been restored to the maximum possible extent, they immediately forwarded the report and video file to the cold case team. After review, investigators recognized that the video provided a crucial piece missing in 2001, visual confirmation that Emily entered the garage, but never reappeared in the camera's field of view. This aligned with statements from multiple witnesses that they had not seen the vehicle leave the neighborhood during the relevant period. As a result, the file was sent directly to DA Cartwright for evaluation of reopening the investigation. Following a discussion with the cold case team, DA Cartwright reviewed the prior investigative milestones and determined that the restored video evidence was sufficient to reopen the file under the new evidentiary lead criterion. The visual confirmation that the victim did not reappear after entering Nathan's garage, combined with previous suspicions regarding the timeline, behavior, and scattered physical evidence, created substantial grounds to reevaluate the disappearance as potentially criminal. DA Cartwright immediately issued an order to reactivate File 02147, moving it to active investigation status and assigning a dedicated investigative team to take over the case, with the task of recompiling all old data, cross-referencing it with the newly restored video, and reassessing previously dismissed hypotheses. This decision marked the first time in 12 years that Emily Whitford's disappearance emerged from frozen status and officially entered a phase of reanalysis using modern technology, opening the possibility of determining what really happened in Nathan's garage on that July afternoon in 2001. After the restored video showed Emily entering the garage but not leaving, the investigative team restructured the entire 2001 evidence file and transferred the portions related to microtraces to the forensic lab for analysis with modern technology. Previously, dust, soil, and microparticle samples collected from Nathan's Suburban had only been stored as photographs and descriptive reports because there was insufficient physical material for testing. But in 2014, high-resolution image-based microtrace analysis allowed reconstruction of mineral composition based on light reflectance and grain structure. The forensic team began by rescanning the series of photographs taken of the undercarriage of Nathan's Suburban in 2001 using spectral mineral analysis software. The images showed dark red soil adhering to the undercarriage, with grains displaying a platy structure and slight metallic sheen, indicating a high likelihood of elevated iron oxide content. When cross-referenced with the Utah State Geological Database, the analysis team found the soil sample most compatible with the red sandstone sediment characteristics of the Price Canyon region, an area more than an hour's drive from Bountiful, where iron-rich oxidized strata produce a deep red color that adheres strongly to metal undercarriages. This result was flagged as a high-significance trace because this soil type does not occur in residential areas along the Wasatch Front, including Bountiful, Farmington, or adjacent parts of the Salt Lake Valley. This reinforced the earlier conclusion that the Suburban had left the area either immediately before or after the time of Emily's disappearance. To increase reliability, the forensic team continued analyzing images taken inside Emily's vehicle and identified a very small amount of red dust adhering to the edge of the passenger side floor mat. Although the particle quantity was minimal and mixed with ordinary road dust, the software still identified similarity in hue and grain morphology with the soil sample from under the Suburban. This suggested that both vehicles may have contacted the same geological environment within a close time frame. Using this data, investigators collaborated with forensic geographers to implement geolocation mapping based on mineral composition. Price Canyon, the area initially identified as highly probable, was placed at the center of the analysis. To ensure no possibilities were overlooked, the forensic team compared the soil mineral composition with other areas featuring prominent red sediment, such as 9 Mile Canyon, Spanish Fork Canyon, and valleys near Helper. After eliminating areas with low population density or unrealistic travel feasibility for the Suburban in 2001, the forensic geography team narrowed the scope to locations accessible by road, consistent with Nathan's vehicle capabilities, and within the distance he could have traveled during the unexplained gap in the timeline. 6 priority areas were designated: a narrow section in Price Canyon, a side canyon branch near Soldier Summit, a red soil area north of Helper, 2 low-traffic dirt road segments near Carbon County, and a transitional geological section in Spanish Fork Canyon. All of these areas shared geological similarity with the trace soil on the Suburban, but Price Canyon stood out due to the highest mineral compatibility ratio according to spectral analysis. To strengthen the analytical direction, the geolocation team constructed a hypothetical travel map based on the 12:40-20 p.m. blank period in the 2001 timeline. According to historical Utah traffic data, midday traffic on routes leading to Price Canyon was light on the day of the incident, meaning travel by Suburban could have occurred with minimal traffic log visibility. Furthermore, the map determined that driving from Bountiful to the Price Canyon entrance via I-15, then US 6, required approximately 65 to 75 minutes, which fit within the time frame Nathan could not clearly account for. To ensure the conclusion did not miss alternative possibilities, the forensic team ran a soil probability mapping simulation model, calculating compatibility likelihood of the soil sample across Utah geological zones. The simulation results showed Price Canyon as the highest probability match, far exceeding all other areas. The forensic report emphasized that the red sandstone soil found on the Suburban provided high accuracy in locating where the vehicle had traveled close to the time of the incident, as this soil has strong adhesion properties and is very difficult to completely remove without thorough cleaning. When cross-referenced with 2001 scene photographs, Nathan's Suburban showed only superficial cleaning of the upper body, while the undercarriage retained the accumulated soil layer, allowing the geological analysis to yield a clear conclusion. With the forensic results and forensic geography map completed, the investigative team compiled a list of 6 terrain points for survey, ranked by priority. 1. A narrow branch in Price Canyon near the area with characteristic red rock walls. 2. A natural pull-off point along US 6 with dark red soil. 3. The entrance to a trail leading deep into a canyon near Helper. 4. A rocky debris area beside Soldier Summit. 5. A narrow dirt road segment in Carbon County with matching mineral soil. 6. A transitional zone in Spanish Fork Canyon where similar soil group was detected. This list was entered into the main case file along with the forensic report, marking the first step in identifying a specific direction of suspicion based on micro-trace evidence, an element the 2001 investigation had no capability to exploit. After forensic results and geographical analysis identified Price Canyon and surrounding areas as high-probability locations the Suburban may have traveled through, the investigative team decided to re-interview Nathan and Daniel using cognitive interview techniques to directly compare their old statements with the new chain of evidence, while also assessing both men's psychological responses to the strengthened information. Nathan's interview was conducted first, with the goal of measuring the consistency of his recollection when asked to recall event details in reverse order, describe them through sensory details, or recount from another person's perspective, techniques designed to detect discrepancies in deliberate recall. When asked to describe the moment Emily left the garage, Nathan maintained his original statement that she went shopping, left the house around 100 p.m., and that he did not observe her direction of travel because he was busy with the kids. Investigators posed a cross-check question. If Emily left in her own car, why did the camera record no movement on the driveway? Nathan replied that the camera might not have captured it, but the interviewers pointed out that the motion activation mechanism had been confirmed to function normally that day. When asked to explain the complete absence of imagery showing Emily leaving the garage, Nathan could provide no clear answer beyond repeating that he didn't remember the details. This caused his statement to begin showing inconsistency with the video data. Next, investigators moved to cross-referencing the afternoon timeline gap. Using the forensic summary of the red soil trace under the Suburban, they asked Nathan whether he had left Bountiful that afternoon. Nathan again insisted that he was home the entire time, but when asked to describe his specific activities in 15-minute increments, he began repeating vague responses, saying he was in the house with the kids, but could provide no verifiable details. When presented with the forensic geography map showing the Suburban's likely travel through an area with Price Canyon's characteristic soil composition, Nathan immediately denied it, but could not provide a plausible explanation for the red soil's presence on the vehicle, nor for the match between the dust inside the Suburban and the dust inside Emily's car. Throughout the re-interview, he maintained a defensive posture, did not alter his prior statements, and repeatedly asserted that I didn't leave the house, despite mounting indirect evidence to the contrary. Investigators noted a stable level of resistance with little emotional fluctuation, but also observed that the details Nathan provided could not reasonably account for the forensic and restored VHS video data. Daniel's interview was conducted afterward, and unlike Nathan, he appeared flustered from the outset when asked to recall the full sequence of events on the day Emily came to the house. Using cognitive interview techniques, investigators asked Daniel to describe the events in reverse order, from evening back to midday, and he immediately struggled to organize the timeline. When cross-referencing his statement with the VHS video, investigators emphasized that the footage showed only Emily entering the garage and not leaving, and questioned Daniel about his prior claim that the garage door was open around 10:10 p.m. Daniel displayed signs of stress, rapid breathing, looking down at the table, hesitant answers. He said, "Maybe I misremembered the time," then shifted to saying he was unsure whether the garage door was open or closed at that point. This contradicted his earlier statement, which had been fairly definitive. Investigators continued using sensory recall techniques, asking Daniel to describe sounds, smells, and lighting inside the garage when he went down to find Nathan. Daniel became confused, inaccurately describing the garage layout that the investigative team had previously documented. When directly questioned about the 12:40 to 2 p.m. gap, Daniel showed increasing psychological instability, stating he was just around the house, but could not clearly recall whether he entered the garage or where Nathan was at the time. This response was recorded as a heightened stress response, commonly seen when an interviewee avoids critical details. When investigators mentioned the red soil analysis under Nathan's Suburban and asked Daniel to confirm whether he knew where the vehicle had been used that afternoon, Daniel denied it, but with uncertainty, saying, "I wasn't keeping track of him all day," but immediately afterward added, "I think he was home the whole time." The contradiction between the two statements, separated by only a few seconds, indicated cognitive disruption or an attempt to maintain a protective narrative for Nathan. Investigators noted that Daniel repeatedly shifted his level of certainty when referring to key details: the timing of Nathan's presence in the garage door status, whether the Suburban left the house, elements that an uninvolved person would typically describe with greater stability. At the conclusion of the interviews, the Behavior Review Panel compiled the two re-interview records and issued a new classification. Nathan was identified as the primary suspect based on the degree of incompatibility between his statements and the video, forensic, financial behavior, and unexplained time gap evidence. Daniel was identified as a secondary suspect due to clear psychological instability in response to the new evidence and spontaneously arising contradictions in his statements. Both conclusions were updated in the case file, marking the official shift of the case from a frozen cold case to an active investigation with clearly identified suspects requiring further clarification. After the re-interviews of Nathan and Daniel revealed increasingly clear contradictions and psychological responses inconsistent with their prior statements, the investigative team compiled all new evidence, including the restored VHS video, microtrace analysis from the Suburban's undercarriage, forensic geography results pointing to Price Canyon as a high-probability area, and anomalies in the statements to submit to the district court for a second deep search warrant on Nathan's residence. The warrant application emphasized that the new evidence had surpassed ordinary suspicion and met Utah's probable cause standard, including imagery confirming Emily did not leave the garage, distinctive soil adhering to the Suburban proving the vehicle left Bountiful during the time Nathan claimed he was home, and the lack of consistency in both Nathan's and Daniel's statements when re-examined using cognitive interview techniques. The judge, after reviewing all materials, approved the expanded search warrant authorizing investigators to conduct an unrestricted examination of the interior of the house, garage, and related storage areas. The search was executed the following morning, with forensic and scene investigation teams coordinating to ensure collection of all potentially relevant evidence. Upon entering the garage, this time with full access, the forensic specialists swept each area, using low-angle lighting to detect scratches, settled dust, and any concealed items. In the corner of the garage near the tool shelf, they discovered a 50-foot roll of yellow synthetic rope, still in its original packaging and bearing a product code matching the receipt of Nathan's purchase prior to Emily's disappearance. The roll was placed behind an old supply bin, a location not easily visible from outside without a warrant. Nearby, in a metal drawer beneath the shelf, the forensic team found a pair of used latex gloves, rolled up and stuffed deep under miscellaneous tools. Quick examination under angled light revealed red-brown soil residue on the glove surfaces, consistent with the soil type identified on the Suburban's undercarriage. Although immediate conclusion was not possible, this caused the gloves to be flagged as priority evidence number 1. While another group examined shells and containers, they found a statewide Utah paper road map, the common type from 2001, with multiple markings in red ink. Among the circled locations, 3 matched exactly with the previously identified forensic geography zones: 1 near the Price Canyon entrance, 1 secondary pull-off along US 6, and 1 site adjacent to a canyon branch north of Helper. These markings were recorded as anomalous because, according to Nathan's prior statements, he did not leave the Bountiful area on the day of the incident. The map was immediately sealed and entered into the evidence log for further analysis. Continuing the house search, investigators checked cabinets in the laundry room and found an unopened box of latex gloves of the same type as the used pair. This created a direct link between items purchased before the incident and evidence bearing red soil traces. While searching household trash for items potentially discarded after the event, the forensic team discovered a length of wide duct tape that had been cut, with several particles of matching red-tone dust adhering to it. Although not sufficient for direct linkage, it matched the type of tape Nathan had purchased per receipt and was recorded as supplementary evidence. All items were transported to the forensic lab for detailed analysis. The rope roll, though still packaged, had a product code matching the previously identified transaction. The gloves were examined using mineral matching methods, confirming that the adhering soil matched the microtrace composition on the Suburban's undercarriage, reinforcing the argument that Nathan used the gloves when contacting the red soil environment. The Utah map was considered key evidence because there was no reasonable explanation for Nathan to mark terrain areas more than an hour's drive from his home, especially given his repeated denials of leaving Bountiful. Forensic lab results were compiled in an internal report. The chain of evidence recovered from Nathan's house not only proved he had prepared items potentially usable in concealing activity, but also reinforced that he had traveled to an area matching the forensic soil profile. Additionally, the presence of soil-stained gloves and a map marking locations consistent with geolocation analysis indicated Nathan's active role, not mere coincidence. With this evidence, the investigative team established 2 additional charges: obstruction of justice due to intentionally providing false statements and impeding investigation, tampering with evidence due to the likely use of items to clean the scene or conceal traces. The report was immediately forwarded to DA Samuel Cartwright to proceed with the next legal steps, as the new body of evidence had constructed a specific connection between preparatory behavior, contradictory statements, and physical traces related to Emily Whitford's disappearance. With the new body of evidence obtained from the second search warrant, combined with forensic analysis reinforcing the likelihood of Nathan's direct involvement in Emily's disappearance, DA Samuel Cartwright signed off on an arrest warrant for Nathan Hale on charges of obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and suspicion of involvement in criminal conduct leading to the disappearance. Simultaneously, based on the level of inconsistency in his statements and the supportive role demonstrated during prior interviews, Daniel Hale was also issued an arrest warrant as a secondary suspect with potential involvement in aiding, concealing, or possessing critical information that was not disclosed. The investigative team executed 2 separate arrest operations early in the morning to prevent any possibility of the brothers communicating or destroying additional evidence. The first team approached Nathan's residence at 6:10 a.m. When Nathan opened the door following a knock and request to cooperate, officers announced the arrest warrant, handcuffed him, and read his Miranda rights in accordance with procedure. All of Nathan's personal electronic devices, including his phone, laptop, external hard drives, and tablet, were seized on scene pursuant to a supplemental digital device search warrant to prevent data deletion or contact with Daniel. Vehicle keys, particularly those for the Suburban, were sealed and transferred to the forensic unit for deeper examination. Meanwhile, a second team approached Daniel's residence in Centerville. Daniel appeared more surprised than Nathan when he was escorted out of the house, repeatedly asking, "What's going on?" but was instructed to remain silent per protocol until reaching the interview room. Digital devices in Daniel's home, along with personal documents, receipts, and notebooks, were also seized for analysis of possible complicity or unusual communication with Nathan during the period of Emily's disappearance. After both suspects were transported to the temporary holding facility at the Davis County Sheriff's Office, the investigative team began the process of cataloging newly seized evidence. Electronic devices were immediately transferred to the Digital Forensics Unit for unlocking, imaging, and creation of forensic copies to preserve data prior to content analysis. Suburban vehicle records and documents related to maintenance, travel, or repair transactions were reviewed to determine whether any evidence indicated the vehicle had been used to travel to the Price Canyon area or other previously identified forensic geography points. Other seized items, such as the map, notebooks, and purchase receipts, were categorized by event group to support future interrogation processes. While the forensic team conducted digital device analysis, the investigative team prepared for formal interrogations. 2 completely separate interview rooms were arranged to ensure Nathan and Daniel had no opportunity to exchange information or align their statements. The interrogation team developed 2 distinct strategies. For Nathan, the focus was confronting his prior statements with physical evidence, the restored VHS video, forensic soil samples, rope roll, gloves, and mark map. For Daniel, the goal was to exploit psychological inconsistencies and the unexplained time gaps in the timeline that he could not reasonably account for during previous interviews. All questions were drafted using segmented confrontation techniques designed to create cognitive pressure and detect subtle changes in responses when sensitive details were raised, such as the timing of Emily's entry into the garage, suburban activity, and Daniel's presence in the area. Supporting interrogation materials included a restructured timeline table, geolocation map, and combined forensic microtrace report. During preparation, the investigative team also verified calls, messages, and communication history between the 2 brothers in the 48 hours before and after Emily's disappearance to establish logical connections among behavior, physical evidence, and possible coordination. With temporary detention orders and interrogation authority activated, the case file officially moved into the active phase, the first time since 2001 that 2 suspects were in custody, and the evidence system was organized strongly enough to lay the foundation for subsequent investigative steps. Daniel was brought into the second interview room after the investigative team completed initial processing checks, and within the first 20 minutes of the session, the psychological instability already evident in prior interviews began to surface clearly. Investigators applied continuous cross-referencing between the timeline, restored VHS video, and forensic soil samples to force Daniel to confront details he could not evade. When asked to explain again the events in the garage on the afternoon of July 17, 2001, Daniel initially repeated his vague statement that he didn't remember exactly. But when investigators placed the forensic photographs of the Suburban and the Utah map on the table and read back Nathan's statements which did not match the data, Daniel began to waver. A marked change in breathing rate, constant avoidance of eye contact, and tightly clenched hands led the interrogation team to conclude that a psychological breaking point had appeared. When asked to recount events in reverse order using cognitive recall technique, Daniel paused unusually long, then suddenly said, "I didn't think this would go this far." Investigators did not respond directly, but shifted to the key question. "When you entered the garage, was Emily still conscious?" This question struck directly at the timeline segment that neither Nathan nor Daniel had been able to explain previously. Daniel remained silent for nearly a minute, then said quietly, "She was lying on the floor, not responding." This was the first time Daniel admitted to seeing Emily in an unresponsive state while he was present in the garage. Investigators immediately asked him to describe the situation in detail, without emotion or speculation, only what he actually saw. Daniel described the garage as darker than usual because the door was only partially open, with a long streak on the floor extending from near the tool shelf to the area where Emily was lying. He said that when he entered, he saw Nathan kneeling beside Emily, holding something he didn't dare look at closely. When asked to describe Emily's condition, Daniel said she wasn't moving anymore, head tilted to one side, hair covering her face. Investigators continued probing. "Did you hear Nathan say anything?" Daniel replied. He said everything had gone beyond what was planned. After that, Daniel began recounting the sequence of events, step by step, no longer evading as before. According to his statement, after Daniel entered the garage and saw Emily lying motionless, Nathan said, "We need to handle this right away, before the kids come down." Daniel admitted he was terrified but didn't know what to do, so he just stood and watched as Nathan pulled a tarp from the corner of the garage and used it to wrap around Emily's body. Daniel claimed he did not touch Emily himself, only held the garage door partially closed to prevent neighbors from seeing in. This matched the time frame of the restored VHS video, the period during which Emily disappeared, and no footage showed her leaving the garage. When investigators asked directly, "How was the body transported?" Daniel admitted that Nathan dragged the tarp-wrapped body to the rear of the Suburban and asked him to help open the back hatch. Daniel said, "I didn't want to do it, but I did. I was scared." He described Nathan using rope to tie the tarp shut, rope matching the evidence recovered from the garage. When asked to describe the route from Nathan's house to the disposal location, Daniel closed his eyes for a few seconds, then said, "We took I-15, then switched to US 6. He told me to watch if anyone was following." This direction of travel fully aligned with the forensic geography results that had identified Price Canyon as the area with soil compatible with the soil under the Suburban. Daniel described the route with an accuracy the investigators had not anticipated. From Bountiful, they entered I-15 southbound, then turned east onto US 6 through Spanish Fork Canyon, continuing through the canyon to the red soil area near Price Canyon. There, Nathan drove the Suburban onto a narrow dirt path a few dozen meters off the main road. Daniel said he didn't remember the exact name of the location, but clearly recalled the terrain features. There was a section of dark red rock like a sheer cliff, and a sunken area with low brush. Investigators showed satellite images of Price Canyon, and Daniel immediately pointed to a spot near the intersection of the secondary dirt road and the cliff face located within the list of 6 priority points previously identified by the forensic geography team. When asked to describe how Nathan disposed of the body, Daniel said, "Nathan pulled the tarp out of the vehicle and pushed it under a low tree, then covered it with soil and debris." Daniel admitted he did not stay close enough to see the entire action, but confirmed that when they left, the tarp was no longer visible. This matched the characteristics of Price Canyon, soil easily disturbed and capable of leaving trace soil on vehicles, consistent with the microtraces collected in 2001. After Daniel completed his full statement, investigators prepared the official record. Daniel was read each point for confirmation and signed the document, affirming that the statement was given voluntarily and without coercion. This statement, with its detailed route, location, terrain description, and garage events, all of which matched the forensic evidence and restored video, became the pivotal turning point in the case, providing a sufficiently strong legal foundation to initiate field action to verify the body disposal location. Immediately after Daniel signed the official statement and the suspected location in the Price Canyon area was identified, a multi-agency search team from Davis County, coordinated with Utah Search and Rescue, was deployed to the scene as described by Daniel. The marked area was approximately 300 meters off the main US 6 road, accessed via a narrow, sloping dirt path along the mountainside, leading to a characteristic dark red terrain featuring steep cliffs and natural depressions. The location matched significantly with the prior forensic geography analysis, reinforcing the assessment that Daniel's statement was highly accurate. The search team divided the area into 3 subzones: a sunken strip of land at the base of the cliff, a narrow canyon fissure extending nearly 40 meters, and a winding dry stream bed that typically accumulated soil and rock after each rainy season. Based on Daniel's description of a sunken area with low brush, the team first focused on the base of cliff zone, where the distinctive red soil layer is easily disturbed and preserves signs if a body has been buried. Forensic specialists used soil probes and inspection cameras to examine the surface soil layer, while the SAR team conducted parallel sweeps, checking every square meter. Less than 2 hours into the search, one team member detected an anomaly on the ground. a roughly 1.2 square meter patch of lighter red soil, cracked in a loose rister, brittle pattern inconsistent with the surrounding naturally compacted soil. When the top layer was excavated to about 15 centimeters, the team uncovered the edge of a black plastic bag partially buried. The area was immediately secured, and the forensic team took over the scene to ensure proper forensic excavation protocol. Upon opening the first plastic bag, the contents included fragments of women's clothing, a t-shirt, and jeans showing heavy decomposition, consistent with the final outfit Emily was described wearing by family in 2001. A second, deeper buried bag contained dark fabric pieces, severed rope segments, and a small quantity of wide duct tape, matching the type recovered from Nathan's garage. At a depth of approximately 40 centimeters, the forensic team discovered human skeletal remains, including femur, pelvis, and a partially decomposed skull, still retaining basic identifiable structure. The exhumation proceeded with extreme care to preserve skeletal positioning and arrangement, as this data is critical for reconstructing the mechanism of death. The bone fragments, clothing, rope, and plastic bags were sealed, assigned scene numbers, and immediately transported to the Utah State Forensic Lab. There, the forensic pathology team conducted preliminary analysis. Anatomical features indicated the remains belonged to an adult female of medium stature. Comparison with the 2001 dental records provided by family showed high compatibility in 3 lower molar teeth and sinus cavity shape, providing sufficient basis to conclude the remains were those of Emily Whitford. Further examination of bone trauma revealed a longitudinal fracture line on the skull consistent with heavy blunt force impact from a hard object, reinforcing the likelihood that the victim was rendered unconscious prior to disposal. Wear marks on cervical vertebrae and microfiber impressions on the rope indicated the body may have been bound or secured, matching Daniel's description of Nathan using rope to tie the tarp. Some rib fragments showed localized fractures, but the degree of decomposition prevented determination of whether they occurred before or after death. However, synthesizing the bone trauma and associated evidence, the forensic team concluded that the mechanism of death most likely involved heavy force to the head or neck, resulting in unconsciousness or death prior to body transport. The forensic findings were subsequently compiled into a full report and immediately forwarded to the main investigative team. The identification of the remains, combined with a correspondence between the rope at the scene and evidence recovered from Nathan's garage, formed a continuous chain of evidence linking Daniel's statement, forensic analysis, and the actual condition of the remains. The legal value of locating the remains precisely where Daniel described was deemed extremely strong, confirming that the information Daniel provided was not speculative but derived from direct participation in the disposal process. Once the Price Canyon scene was secured and evidence transferred to the forensic center, the end-of-day report stated that the search had been completed and the recovered items satisfied the requirements to connect Nathan's and Daniel's actions to Emily's disappearance in 2001. After Emily's remains were identified and all evidence from Price Canyon was transferred to the forensic lab, the investigative team proceeded to the critical phase of the case, reconstructing the sequence of events based on Daniel's detailed statement, skeletal examination results, traces collected at the 2001 scene, and items seized from Nathan's garage during the second search warrant. The reconstruction followed a timeline reconstruction methodology, cross-referencing each milestone with forensic data, video, and statements to ensure consistency. According to Daniel's statement, the incident began in the garage around 12:40 p.m. when Emily entered as instructed by Nathan, matching the restored VHS video that captured her entering but showed no departure. Combined with the skull examination results showing a fracture from heavy blunt force, the investigative team determined that Emily was struck with a hard object in the garage, causing immediate loss of consciousness. This aligned with Daniel's description that when he entered the garage, Emily was no longer responding. The absence of blood traces in the garage in 2001 was explained by the nature of the injury. The blow may not have caused spatter, and Daniel stated that Nathan cleaned the floor before the kids came down, consistent with the chemical odor and unusually shiny garage floor noted by investigators during the initial survey. The long scratches on the concrete floor documented in 2001 were now identified as drag marks from the tarp or the victim's body, exactly as Daniel described Nathan pulling the tarp from near the tool shelf toward the Suburban. The rope roll recovered in the garage in 2014, still in original packaging but matching the pre-disappearance purchase receipt, was explained as the remaining portion. Microfiber marks on the cervical vertebrae and on the tarp excavated from Price Canyon showed that a section of the rope had been used to bind or secure the body prior to transport. This reinforced the description that Nathan tied the tarp shut before loading it into the vehicle. Once the body was wrapped and moved to the rear of the Suburban, Daniel stated that he opened the cargo hatch at Nathan's request, while Nathan lifted the upper body of Emily. Micro-trace analysis from the Suburban's rear cargo floor matched the trace soil at Price Canyon, confirming the body had been placed in the cargo area at least once. From here, the investigative team cross-referenced timing from 12:40 p.m. to near 01:17. Nathan handled matters in the garage. From 1:17 to 1015 p.m., per Daniel's statement, the two prepared the vehicle, and from 1:17 to 2:30 p.m., the Suburban left the residential area. The lack of witnesses seeing the vehicle leave the driveway was explained by Daniel's statement that the garage door was only partially open, and the Suburban backed straight out onto the street, outside the field of view of the neighbor's camera that was aimed at the driveway. Upon leaving Bountiful, the route Daniel described fully matched the forensic geography analysis, south on I-15, then east on US 6 through Spanish Fork Canyon, continuing into Price Canyon. The red sandstone soil characteristics in that area matched the soil adhering to the Suburban's undercarriage and the red dust fibers inside Emily's vehicle, creating a forensic statement linkage. The presence of red dust inside Emily's car was explained by Daniel's description that Nathan leaned on the front seat with his hand while retrieving an item from the vehicle before they departed, transferring micro-trace onto the floor mat. At Price Canyon, Daniel described a hurried disposal. Nathan pulled the tarp down into the sunken area, covered it with low brush and rock debris. This disposal behavior matched the recovered evidence: trash bags containing clothing, severed rope segments, and duct tape. Forensic examination of the rope and tape from the scene partially matched items seized from Nathan's residence. Reconstructing the body placement, the investigative team determined the initial position based on soil impressions and bone positioning. The body was placed on its left side, head oriented toward the cliff face, consistent with the right side skull fracture from blunt force impact. This supported the conclusion that the fatal injury occurred prior to disposal. Rib fractures were present, but could not be confirmed as antemortem or postmortem due to decomposition. Therefore, the forensic team noted that the cause of death was most likely head trauma combined with possible oxygen deprivation if the neck was compressed, based on microfiber impressions around the cervical vertebrae. All data was integrated into a 3D forensic reconstruction model, recreating the movements and positions of objects in the garage at the moment Emily lost consciousness. The model showed that the assault most likely occurred while Emily was standing near the tool bench, based on the angle of impact and skull fracture path. After the model was finalized, the investigative team continued reconstructing the transport phase using route simulation. The results showed that the Suburban had sufficient time and realistic conditions to reach Price Canyon and return to the Bountiful area in the afternoon without attracting attention, consistent with the absence of witnesses observing the vehicle in the area for an extended period. The use of the Utah map, marked with locations matching the disposal site, indicated that Nathan had planned or at least scouted the area beforehand or on the day of the incident, assessed as evidence of preparatory behavior. After completing all reconstruction steps, the investigative team compiled the indictment file with the main elements: assault causing death in the garage, transport of the body using a personal vehicle, disposal at Price Canyon, and intentional concealment of evidence. This file was forwarded to DA Samuel Cartwright to initiate formal prosecution proceedings against Nathan Hale for murder in connection with disappearance and against Daniel Hale for tampering with evidence and accessory to the crime. Nathan Hale's trial opened at the Davis County Courthouse nearly 3 years after the case file was reactivated, marking the culmination of one of the longest-running missing persons investigations in the region. Right from the opening statement, the prosecution presented the charging structure based on 3 pillars: the chain of forensic evidence linking the garage, the vehicle, and Price Canyon. Daniel Hale's direct testimony describing the events in the garage and the body disposal, and the physical evidence seized from Nathan's home, including the rope, the map marked with suspicious locations, and latex gloves bearing red soil residue consistent with the microtrace soil samples. The prosecution emphasized that the restored VHS video was the first brick in the evidentiary chain confirming that Emily had entered the garage, but no footage showed her ever leaving. Following the opening, the prosecution called its first witness, the forensic lead investigator, who presented in detail the analysis of the soil composition under the Suburban's undercarriage and its near-perfect match with soil from Price Canyon. He described the microtrace analysis method and demonstrated that the soil could not have originated from any residential area around Bountiful. The prosecution then presented the reconstructed timeline, cross-referencing Nathan's statements with video timestamps and forensic data, highlighting a nearly 2-hour unexplained gap in which no evidence supported Nathan's claim that he was home taking care of the kids. The high point of the prosecution's case came when Daniel Hale took the witness stand. After being examined on his legal rights and prior plea agreement, Daniel recounted the garage events exactly as detailed in his signed official statement. Emily entered the garage around 12:40 p.m. A brief argument erupted between her and Nathan, and immediately afterward, Nathan used a hard object to strike her, causing her to collapse. Daniel testified that he saw Emily lying motionless on the floor, that Nathan pulled a tarp from the corner of the garage to wrap the body, and that he himself was asked to open the rear cargo hatch of the Suburban so Nathan could load the body inside. Daniel described the route they traveled, specifying traffic landmarks, Price Canyon features, and the exact disposal location, all of which matched the field search results in forensic geography analysis. The prosecution then displayed the Utah map found in Nathan's home and pointed out that the marked locations aligned precisely with the areas Daniel described, as well as with the forensic zones identified as having similar soil composition. Taken together, the prosecution argued that this was not a random series of events, but a systematic plan to conceal the consequences of a crime. In response, Nathan's defense counsel attempted to break the forensic linkage by questioning the precision of the soil microtrace analysis. They argued that Utah has many areas with similar soil composition, and that a match did not prove the Suburban had traveled to the exact location claimed. However, the forensic expert affirmed that the mineral spectral match with the Price Canyon region was extremely distinctive, and the probability of error was very low. The defense also tried to discredit Daniel's testimony by emphasizing his plea deal and motive to shift blame to Nathan to avoid a harsher sentence. They argued that Daniel's statement was unreliable because he admitted to being frightened and panicked at the time of the incident. The prosecution countered by pointing out that Daniel's testimony aligned with independent physical evidence from the red soil traces, rope, duct tape, to the actual location of the remains at Price Canyon. No detail in Daniel's account was found to be false when cross-checked against physical evidence. Nathan's attorney continued attacking the timeline, asserting there was no direct evidence proving Nathan committed violence in the garage. The prosecution responded that the absence of direct evidence, such as blood or fingerprints, was the result of scene cleanup, precisely the tampering behavior charged in the indictment. Moreover, the VHS video, though not high resolution, remained powerful evidence confirming the victim entered the garage normally but never exited. After 10 days of trial, the jury retired to deliberate on 3 main charges: murder in the second degree, kidnapping, and tampering with evidence. They reviewed the VHS video, forensic samples, 3D reconstruction model, and Daniel's testimony. Deliberations lasted more than 8 hours, with the jury focusing most intensely on whether Daniel's testimony was sufficiently credible to establish the initial assault in the garage. Members also analyzed whether Nathan could offer alternative explanations for the marked map, the red soil-stained gloves, and the Suburban's route. The final verdict was reached by an 11-to-1 vote. The jury found Nathan Hale guilty of murder in the second degree, kidnapping, and tampering with evidence. For murder in the second degree, the jury determined that Nathan intentionally caused Emily's death, but that premeditation sufficient for murder in the first degree was not proven. The kidnapping charge was established based on the act of unlawfully restraining Emily and transporting her body, while tampering was based on cleaning the garage and disposing of evidence at Price Canyon. When the verdict was read, Nathan remained stoic and showed no strong reaction, while Daniel kept his head bowed and eyes fixed downward throughout. This outcome affirmed that more than a decade of reinvestigation effort had produced a consistent legal conclusion, connecting every piece from the restored video to forensic microtraces and witness testimony into a complete picture of the Emily Whitford case. At the sentencing hearing held 2 weeks after the jury found Nathan Hale guilty of murder in the second degree, kidnapping, and tampering with evidence, the Davis County District Judge read the sentence in a packed courtroom that included members of Emily's family and the investigative team that had pursued the case for over a decade. Considering the severity of the conduct causing the victim's death in his own garage, unlawfully restraining the victim, transporting the body across multiple counties, disposing of it at Price Canyon, and intentionally cleaning the scene to obstruct investigation. The court imposed a combined sentence of 55 to 65 years imprisonment for Nathan Hale, with a minimum term of 55 years to be served before parole eligibility could be considered. The court emphasized that the sentence reflected not only the consequences of the acts, but also the defendant's prolonged efforts to conceal the truth, including false statements, evidence destruction, and obstruction of justice from 2001 through 2014. In the same hearing, Daniel Hale received a 12-year sentence pursuant to his previously signed plea deal, applied to charges of accessory to homicide and tampering. The judge acknowledged that Daniel had provided pivotal testimony that enabled authorities to locate Emily's remains, assisted in reconstructing the case, and facilitated Nathan's prosecution. Nevertheless, Daniel remained accountable for failing to report the incident immediately and for participating in the disposal of the body. Following the sentencing, the Office of DA Samuel Cartwright presented a comprehensive investigative summary covering the period from 2001 to 2014, outlining the reasons the case could not be resolved initially and the key factors that led to its resolution more than a decade later. The report identified 4 fundamental shortcomings in the early phase. 1. Lack of physical evidence at the scene due to Nathan's cleanup, which left police without probable cause for a deep search warrant. 2. Limitations of 2001 forensic technology that prevented analysis of soil samples and microtraces. 3. Absence of comprehensive camera footage because outdated VHS technology did not allow restoration. 4. Failure to connect the timeline to geographical data due to the lack of microparticle analysis and forensic geolocation tools. At the same time, the report highlighted 3 major advancements in the 2014 reinvestigation that created the turning point. Digitization and VHS video restoration technology that confirmed Emily entered the garage and never left. 2. Microtrace soil and mineral analysis that established the Suburban had traveled to the Price Canyon area. 3. Cognitive interview techniques that exposed Daniel's psychological inconsistencies, leading to his truthful statement and identification of the disposal site. These elements combined to form a complete unbroken chain of evidence, a classic cold case investigation model, demonstrating the role of modern forensics in reactivating seemingly lost pieces. The report also noted that collaboration among forensics, forensic geography, updated interrogation techniques, and historical data exploitation was the decisive factor in solving the case. The report's conclusion stressed that without technological progress and the commitment to reevaluate the file, the Emily Whitford case might have remained forever in the Davis County cold case files. After the sentence was pronounced, the court issued an order officially closing the file under the status "Case resolved, victim identified, offender convicted," transferring all investigative data, including the 3D reconstruction model, restored video, forensic results, and verified testimony to permanent archive per Utah state procedure. This marked the first time in 13 years that the Emily Whitford file was designated complete, closing one of the longest cases spanning nearly half the lifetimes of many involved, and becoming a textbook example of the value of reopening unsolved missing persons investigations. The story of the Emily Whitford case, spanning from 2001 to 2014, reflects many issues that remain highly relevant in American life today, particularly the fragility of investigative systems without advanced technology, the danger of domestic violence, and the critical role of the community in recognizing subtle warning signs. The case demonstrates how a small gap in the timeline, a closed garage door, or inconsistent statements can conceal the truth for over a decade. Without forensic advancements such as microtrace soil matching Price Canyon or VHS video restoration confirming Emily never left the garage, the case would likely have remained a cold case indefinitely. This reflects a major lesson for modern American society. Technology is a powerful tool, but it only has value when paired with persistence and an unrelenting spirit. Emily's case also reminds us of the importance of trusting intuition when something seems off. Neighbors noticed the sedan never left the driveway. Family knew Emily never shopped without her purse. Those small details, if documented more carefully from the beginning, could have altered the course of the investigation. The lesson for today's American community is to pay attention to subtle behavioral signals from loved ones and neighbors, especially in situations involving divorce, family tension, or controlling behavior. Ultimately, the story underscores that truth can be buried for many years, but justice will arrive if someone keeps searching for it. The 2014 Case Reopening Project, led by DA Samuel Cartwright, stands as proof of the value of perseverance. In modern life, where many issues fade from attention once they disappear from the headlines, Emily's story reminds us that justice depends not only on timing, but also on the determination of those who believe the truth deserves to be found. If you want to keep following gripping case-solving stories like Emily Whitford's, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next journey into uncovering the truth. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video, where justice and truth are always brought to light.